St. Francois County, Missouri, August 17th, 1891. 15 minutes before midnight. Heinrich Vogel had been a miner in the St. Francois Iron Range since 1873, the year he arrived in Missouri from the Rhineland at the age of 23, with no English and 16 years of underground experience already behind him. He was 41 years old in August 1891, a compact and deliberate man who communicated on shift in a mixture of German and broken English that his crew had learned to understand precisely and without translation delay. He was the senior man on the night shift at the Consolidated Iron Works No. 3, and he had been working the deep extension of the Eastern Gallery for 9 weeks, pushing into ground that the company geologist had marked as potentially rich in magnetite, and which had been giving moderate returns in the early cuts. The Eastern Gallery was at 310 feet, deeper than any working face the No. 3 had run before, and the rock at that depth was different from the upper levels in the way that experienced miners understood without being able to articulate. Denser, drier, with a particular acoustic quality when struck that suggested the geology below had not been disturbed in a very long time. On the night of August 17th, at approximately 1:15 p.m, Heinrich Vogel's crew opened a passage that was not on the geological survey. They had been following a fault line that the mine captain had told them would close off within 20 feet. It did not close off. It widened, and at the end of it, there was a door, not a natural opening. A door, a fitting of granite slabs arranged in a configuration that was clearly intentional. The slabs cut to tolerances that made the joins invisible at lamp distance, with a threshold stone that was flat and level and 4 inches thick, and had been placed there with a precision that no natural process produced. The door was sealed. It did not open with the tools available to Vogel's crew. They did not force it. Vogel was not a man who forced things he did not understand. He sent a runner up to the surface, and he positioned his crew outside the granite fitting, and he waited. The mine captain, a man named Joseph Sutter, came down within 20 minutes. He looked at the fitting, and he and Vogel spent 40 minutes attempting to understand the mechanism, if there was one, and at the end of 40 minutes, Sutter told Vogel to bring a bar. The bar found a seam in the lower right corner of the fitting, and the seam gave. Not like stone giving under force, but like something releasing. A mechanical release, Vogel said. A sensation in the bar that was more like a latch disengaging than rock fracturing. The passage behind the fitting opened into a corridor of cut granite, 7 feet high and 4 feet wide, running south by southwest at a slight downward grade. The corridor was 40 feet long. At its end was the chamber. What Heinrich Vogel and Joseph Sutter and 5 crew members found in the chamber at 310 feet beneath the surface of St. Francois County on the night of August 17th, 1891, is documented in 3 sources. A report Sutter filed with the Consolidated Iron Works management the following morning. A letter Vogel wrote in German to his brother in Koblenz, dated August 22nd, 1891. And an account given by crew member William Hartley to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter James Alcott in September 1891. All 3 accounts agree on the core physical facts. The chamber was rectangular, approximately 30 feet by 20 feet, with a ceiling at 12 feet. The floor was cut stone, fitted without mortar, with the same precision as the door fitting. The walls were smooth granite to a height of 7 feet and dressed stone above that. There were 11 figures in the chamber. Each was positioned along the perimeter wall, standing upright, facing the interior of the chamber, with the back against the wall and the hands at the sides. They were skeletal. They were complete, fully articulated, with no visible disarticulation or disturbance. Each was oriented facing east, which the compass bearing of the chamber entrance confirmed was the eastern wall. Heinrich Vogel was 6 feet 1 inch tall, which his crew knew because he was the tallest man on any shift, and his height was a reference point they used for ceiling clearance assessment. The smallest of the 11 skeletal figures cleared his head by what he estimated as 1.5 feet. The tallest cleared his head by what he estimated as 3 feet. 10 feet and 12 feet in standing height. These are the figures reported by Vogel, by Sutter, and by William Hartley in consistent terms. Each figure had an object on its chest, not held, positioned on the sternum, inside the rib cage, resting on the bone. The object was a disc. Circular, approximately 8 inches in diameter, slightly convex on the upper surface, with a flat lower surface that rested on the sternum without fastening. The color was gray, not the gray of iron or the gray of oxidized copper, a different gray, one that all 3 accounts describe as uniform from edge to center, without the tonal variation that surface oxidation produces in any metal that has been exposed to air and time. 11 figures, 11 discs. Each disc on each chest in the same position. The discs were heavy. William Hartley picked one up. He was the only crew member who touched anything in the chamber, a decision he described to Alcott with visible regret, and reported that the disc weighed approximately as much as a good-sized river stone, which Hartley estimated at 12 to 15 pounds. For an 8-inch disc of uniform thickness that Hartley estimated at half an inch, a weight of 12 to 15 pounds implies a density significantly greater than iron and approaching the density of lead or silver, which are the heaviest common metals. The surface was smooth. The edge was sharp, not a cutting edge, but a clean edge with no bevel, as though the disc had been cut from a larger piece with a tool that left no burr. There was no marking on any surface, no inscription, no symbol, no decorative element. Hartley placed the disc back on the sternum of the figure he had taken it from and stepped back. Sutter told the crew to leave the chamber and return to the surface. He sealed the passage entry with a timber barrier and posted a guard before going to file his morning report. The Consolidated Ironworks management responded by noon of August 18th. The mine superintendent, a man named Frederick Barth, came down with a man from the company's St. Louis office, whose name does not appear in any of the 3 accounts. Vogel described him as a company lawyer. Sutter described him as a company representative. Hartley did not describe him at all. They were in the chamber for an hour. When they came out, Barth told Sutter that the company was treating the chamber as a geological anomaly requiring specialist assessment, and that no member of the crew was to discuss the find outside the mine property. He was precise about the language he used. Geological anomaly. He repeated it twice. A representative of the Smithsonian Institution's Bureau of American Ethnology arrived at the No. 3 mine on August 21st, 4 days after the discovery. His name was Edward Chalmers, and he was 39 years old, a physical anthropologist who's traveled a street. Francois County is documented in the Bureau's administrative records. A travel authorization for field assessment, St. Francois County, Missouri, but whose field report, if he produced one, does not appear in the Bureau's archived publications or in the unpublished field note series. Chalmers was at the mine for 2 days. He went into the chamber. When he came out on August 23rd, he left the mine site without speaking to the crew. The discs were no longer in the chamber when Heinrich Vogel was permitted to return on September 2nd to resume work on the Eastern Gallery. The figures were still there. 11 discs were not. The mine was closed on September 14th, 1891. Barth filed the closure with the Missouri Bureau of Mines, citing depleted seams. The Eastern Gallery, which his own company geologists' report of the previous March had projected as productive for a minimum of 4 additional years, was listed in the closure documentation as exhausted. The closure was processed without inspection. The Bureau of Mines waived the standard site visit based on Barth's certification of exhaustion, a waiver that the Bureau's administrative records show was granted within 48 hours of filing, against a standard review period of 10 to 14 business days. The chamber has remained sealed since September 1891. The Consolidated Iron Works No. 3 property, approximately 220 acres in the central section of St. Francois County, was sold in February 1892 to the St. Francois Land and Mineral Company, incorporated in Delaware in December 1891, 2 months before the acquisition. The purchase price was recorded in the county deed books at a figure significantly below the assessed value of comparable iron-bearing properties sold in the same county in the same period. An undervaluation that is either a negotiated discount for a played-out mine or an arrangement between parties whose relationship the deed record does not describe. The St. Francois Land and Mineral Company has never filed a mining permit in Missouri. It has no recorded commercial activity. Its registered agent, a Wilmington law firm, has been renewed without change through 6 state filing cycles. The property taxes on 220 acres of St. Francois County iron country have been paid without a single delinquency since 1892. The current entry point, a county road that terminates at a steel gate, has a camera mounted on the right gate post. The camera housing is weathered. The cable running to it from the gatepost is new. The 11 gray discs present a material impossibility that no known metallurgical tradition of North America can resolve. The density that William Hartley's weight estimate implies, combined with the surface uniformity that all 3 accounts describe, no oxidation layer, no tonal variation, the same color from edge to center, points to a metal alloy whose composition is not represented in any archaeological assemblage from the eastern Missouri region at any period. The density of 12 to 15 pounds for an 8-inch disc of half-inch uniform thickness implies a material denser than lead and approaching the density of bismuth or mercury in solid form. No pre-Columbian North American metallurgical tradition produced an alloy in this density range, and no natural mineral in the Missouri Iron Range has these combined characteristics. The global comparative record offers one point of contact. The gray metal discs described in the St. Francois County account share physical characteristics: uniform gray color, high density, smooth surface without surface oxidation, disc form, with objects described in the Inca tradition of the Andean highlands as tumi, ceremonial objects, some of which have been analyzed and found to contain alloy compositions that are not reproducible with the smelting technology documented in the pre-Columbian Andean record. The tumi parallel is not a cultural argument. The Andean tradition and the St. Francois County Chamber have no documented cultural connection. The parallel is material. A gray, high-density, non-oxidizing metal object of disc or blade form appears in both contexts, separated by thousands of miles and by a historical record that does not connect them. There was a man inside the chamber at 310 feet who did not leave with the Smithsonian representative in August 1891. His name was Luther Crane, and he was a 24-year-old timber setter on Heinrich Vogel's crew. He had gone into the chamber with the crew on the morning of August 18th, before Barth and the company representative arrived, and he had spent approximately 15 minutes inside. He gave an account of what he saw to a correspondent of the Missouri Republican newspaper named Arthur Hines in October 1891, 6 weeks after the mine closure. Hines published the account in a brief item that ran on page 6 of the Republican on October 27th. The account confirmed the dimensions of the chamber, the 11 figures, the 11 discs, and added one detail that appears in none of the other 3 accounts. The walls of the chamber, Crane said, had markings at a height of approximately 5 feet, running in a continuous band around the perimeter. Not carved. He described them as pressed, as though made by a flat tool pressed repeatedly into the stone surface before it fully hardened. The marks were regular, uniform in size, in a consistent sequence, with spacing between groups that suggested intentional separation. He could not read them. He had no vocabulary for what they were. He described them to Heinz as a writing he had never seen. Heinz's item in the Republican was the last published account of the St. Francois County Chamber. Luther Crane died in a mining accident in Bonne Terre, Missouri in 1894, 3 years after his account appeared. He was 27 years old. Heinrich Vogel continued to work as a miner in the St. Francois Iron Range until 1903, when he returned to Germany. His letter to his brother in Koblenz, dated August 22, 1891, survived in the family's possession and was donated to the Landesarchiv Baden-Württemberg in 1968 by Vogel's grandson. A translation was produced for the first time in 2003 by a German-American historian named Peter Schaefer, working on an unrelated project. Schaefer published a brief note in a specialist newsletter for Midwestern mining history, citing the letter as a document of interest in 2004. The newsletter reached an estimated circulation of 240. No mainstream publication followed up. The chamber is still there, at 310 feet below the surface of the 220 acres of street. Francois County land that the Cumberland Land and Mineral Company has held since 1892, behind the granite fitting that released like a latch when Heinrich Vogel pressed a bar into the lower right corner. The 11 figures are still standing against the walls, facing east, in the positions they occupied when the crew first entered. The discs are not there. The discs left on August 23, 1891, in Edward Chalmers's possession, and the Bureau of American Ethnology has no record of them. The 11 figures have been standing in the chamber for longer than the chamber has been sealed. The chamber was sealed before it was found. The perimeter wall carries markings at 5 feet height that a 24-year-old timber setter in 1891 described as a writing he had never seen. Luther Crane has been dead for 130 years. The markings are still on the wall. The gate on the county road has a camera that covers the approach. The cable running to the camera is new. The economic irrationality of the Consolidated Iron Works No. 3 closure is the most precisely documented element of the St. Francois County case. The company's own geological survey of 1890, filed with the Missouri Bureau of Mines as part of the standard annual operations report, projected recoverable magnetite reserves in the Eastern Gallery at a value of approximately $420,000 at the prevailing iron prices, a figure that, at the company's operating costs, represented between 6 and 8 years of profitable extraction. The closure filing of September 14, 1891, submitted 18 months after that projection, cited depleted seams. The filing was accepted without inspection in less than 48 hours. No geological assessment contradicting the 1890 survey was submitted with the closure filing. The stated reason for closure was not supported by any document in the Missouri Bureau of Mines records. The Consolidated Iron Works parent company, the Eastern Missouri Iron and Steel Corporation, continued to operate 3 other St. Francois County mines through 1897 before consolidating into the larger St. Louis-based Missouri Iron Company. None of the other 3 mines was closed in 1891. The No. 3 closure was specific to the No. 3 operation. Within that operation, the Eastern Gallery, the gallery that contained the discovery, was the section the 1890 Geological Survey identified as the primary remaining reserve. A mine that closes the most productive remaining section of its Eastern Gallery, citing depletion, while continuing to operate other mines in the same county whose geological surveys show comparable or lesser reserves, is a mine that is not closing because the reserves are depleted. It is closing because something else has made continued operation in that specific gallery undesirable. Luther Crane was 24 years old when he stood at the wall of the chamber and looked at the marks running in a continuous band at 5 feet height, and tried to find a word for what he was seeing. He used the word he had, a writing he had never seen. He was right that it was a writing. He was right that he had never seen it. He gave his account to Arthur Hines of the Missouri Republican 6 weeks after the mine closed, and the account appeared on page 6, and Luther Crane died in a mining accident in Bonne Terre 3 years later at the age of 27. The account is in the Republican archive. The marks are still on the wall. Heinrich Vogel wrote to his brother in Koblenz 5 days after the discovery, before any institutional instruction had arrived. He described the smell, not unpleasant, a mineral smell, the smell of a metal he could not name, still on his hands when he washed 3 times at home. He washed 3 times, and it went away. He was a man who had spent his working life underground and knew what metals smelled like. And this was a metal he did not know. The letter is in a German archive. The discs are in no American archive. The chamber is still there, at 310 feet, behind the granite fitting that released like a latch when Vogel pressed a bar into the lower right corner. The 11 figures are still standing against the walls facing east. The discs left on August 23, 1891. The wall markings are still at 5 feet height. The gate on the county road has a camera. The cable running to it is new.